She quit her job. Then her Korean Mafia boss showed up at her door. The rain fell over Seoul like a curtain of silver threads, streaking down the tall glass walls of Kang Global headquarters. Inside the towering skyscraper, the atmosphere was the opposite of the storm outside, cold, controlled, and silent. Employees moved carefully through the marble hallways, whispering in low voices, careful not to attract attention. Because on the top floor sat the most feared man in the building, and maybe the entire city, Jae-Min Kang, CEO of Kang Global, billionaire, power broker, and, though few dared to say it out loud, the man rumored to control one of the most powerful underground syndicates in Seoul, which was exactly why Pelumi Adebayo had come to his office. Not to ask, not to negotiate, but to end it. The elevator doors slid open with a soft ding. Pelumi stepped out, clutching a single envelope in her hand. Her heels clicked against the polished marble floor as she walked past the row of silent assistants. Everyone noticed, because Pelumi wasn't just another employee. She was Jae-Min Kang's personal financial analyst, the only outsider ever trusted with access to Kang Global's deepest financial records. A privilege, and a dangerous one. His secretary stood up nervously. Ms. Adebayo, Mr. Kang didn't schedule. I know, Pelumi said calmly. Before the woman could stop her, Pelumi pushed open the heavy black doors. The office was enormous. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the glittering skyline of Seoul. Minimalist furniture, cold marble, absolute silence. And standing near the window with his back turned was Jae-Min Kang. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a perfectly tailored black suit. He didn't turn when she entered, which meant he already knew she was there. Pelumi Adebayo, he said smoothly. His voice was deep, calm, and slightly dangerous. You skipped 3 meetings today. Pelumi walked toward the massive desk and ignored 12 calls. She placed the envelope down in front of his chair. I'm busy. A faint pause. Then he turned slowly. His eyes landed on the envelope, then on her. Dark, sharp, unreadable. What is that? Open it. Jae-Min walked to the desk with controlled steps. When he picked up the envelope, the room seemed to grow even quieter. He slid the paper out, read the first line, and finally looked up. His expression didn't change, but the temperature in the room dropped. You're resigning? Yes. No explanation. No apology. Just a simple answer. For several seconds, he studied her, as if trying to understand a puzzle that didn't make sense. You signed a 5-year contract with this company. Pelumi crossed her arms. I know. You still have 3 years left. I know. Then explain why you're breaking it. Her jaw tightened. Pelumi reached into her bag and pulled out a thin folder. She slid it across the desk. Jae-Min opened it. Inside were printed financial statements, transaction logs, account transfers. He scanned them quickly. His expression remained calm, but his eyes sharpened. Pelumi leaned forward slightly. You hide it well, she said. Shell companies in Singapore. Offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. Shipping payments routed through logistics subsidiaries. She met his gaze directly, but eventually the math stops lying. The silence that followed felt heavy enough to crush the room. Jae-Min closed the folder slowly. And what exactly are you accusing me of, Ms. Adebayo? Pelumi exhaled slowly. You're laundering money. A beat. For weapons. Another beat. And possibly worse. Still no reaction. The man sitting across from her looked as calm as if they were discussing quarterly profits. Then something unexpected happened. Jae-Min smiled. Not warmly, but with quiet amusement. Impressive. Pelumi blinked. You're not even going to deny it? No. Her stomach tightened. Why? He leaned back in his chair. Because suddenly the dynamic in the room had changed. You're the first analyst who's ever noticed. That's not a compliment. Actually, it is. Pelumi shook her head in disbelief. You're unbelievable. You're naive. Her eyes flashed. Excuse me? Jae-Min folded his hands on the desk. Do you know how many governments invest in Kang Global? No. Do you know how many politicians owe me favors?
No.
Do you know how many enemies I have? Pelumi didn't answer. He leaned forward slightly,
His voice lower now.
walking into my office and accusing me of criminal activity is either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. Pelumi met his stare without blinking. Maybe both. That answer seemed to amuse him, but only slightly. So tell me something, he said. If you're so morally outraged, why bring this to me? Because I'm leaving. You could report it to the police. Pelumi scoffed. You really think the police don't already know who you are? A faint smile returned. Good point. She grabbed her bag. I'm done, Mr. Kang. But as she turned to leave, his voice stopped her. Pelumi. It was the first time he'd said her name like that. Not professionally. Almost thoughtfully. She turned back. Jae-Min stood slowly. When he walked around the desk, the power in his presence became even more obvious. He stopped a few steps away from her, close enough that she could see the faint scar near his jaw. You're making a mistake. Maybe. You're throwing away the most powerful position you'll ever have. Pelumi lifted her chin. I'd rather sleep peacefully at night. Jae-Min studied her face, as if memorizing it. Then he said quietly, You're not afraid of me.
No.
Why? Pelumi shrugged. Because powerful men always expect fear. And you? I prefer honesty. For the first time since she'd met him, something flickered behind Jae-Min Kang's eyes. Interest. Real interest. Then let me be honest too, he said. If you walk out that door, your life will never be normal again. Pelumi stared at him. Then she smiled slightly. I never liked normal anyway. She turned, walked toward the door, and, without looking back, left the office. The heavy doors shut behind her. For several seconds, Jae-Min Kang stood completely still. Then he walked back to the window, overlooking Seoul. His bodyguard entered quietly. Sir, should we stop her? Jae-Min looked down at the resignation letter still sitting on his desk. The paper felt strangely significant.
No.
The bodyguard hesitated. But sir, she knows too much. I know. Jae-Min's gaze drifted toward the elevator, where she had disappeared. A slow, thoughtful smile touched his lips. Let her go. Why? Because for the first time in years, someone had walked away from him. Without fear. Without hesitation. Without trying to bargain. And somehow, he wanted to see what she would do next. Keep an eye on her, Jae-Min said calmly. The bodyguard nodded. Yes, sir. As the rain continued pouring over the city of Seoul, Jae-Min Kang whispered softly to himself. Pelumi Adebayo, you just made yourself the most interesting woman in my world. And whether she realized it or not, walking away from him had just started a story neither of them could escape. 2 weeks had passed since Pelumi Adebayo walked out of Kang Global. 2 weeks since she left behind the polished hallways, the intimidating boardrooms, and the piercing gaze of Jae-Min Kang. And yet, peace didn't feel the way she expected. Her new apartment in Itaewon was small compared to the luxury she once worked in. The walls were simple, the furniture modest, and the view was nothing more than the neon lights of crowded streets. But it was hers. No corporate secrets. No dangerous spreadsheets. No mafia bosses watching her every move. Pelumi stood by the kitchen counter, stirring a cup of tea, trying to convince herself she had made the right choice. Outside, the streets buzzed with nightlife, music, laughter, distant traffic. Normal life. The kind she wanted. But somehow, something inside her felt restless. Her phone buzzed again on the counter. Another unknown number. She ignored it. For the past week, she had received strange calls. Numbers that disconnected the moment she answered. It could be nothing. Or it could be something worse. Pelumi shook the thought away. You're being paranoid, she muttered. She carried her tea toward the couch, flipping on the small lamp in the corner. The warm light softened the room. For the first time all evening, she began to relax. Then, ding-dong.
The doorbell rang.
Pelumi froze. Her eyes slowly lifted toward the door. It was almost midnight. No one visited her at midnight. She set the tea down slowly. Another ring. Ding dong. Her heartbeat picked up. Who is it? She called through the door. Silence. Then a deep, calm voice answered from the other side. Open the door, Pelumi. Her stomach dropped. She knew that voice. There was only one man in the world who spoke with that quiet, dangerous authority. Pelumi walked toward the door slowly. Every instinct told her this was a terrible idea, but curiosity and something else she didn't want to admit made her unlock it. The door opened, and there he was, Jae-Min Kang, standing in the dim hallway like he belonged there. His black coat was slightly damp from the night rain, dark hair falling across his forehead. Behind him stood two silent men in suits, bodyguards, unmistakably. The hallway light cast shadows across his sharp features. Pelumi's breath caught. You've got to be kidding me. His dark eyes moved slowly across her face. Hello, Pelumi. Her shock quickly turned into irritation. How did you find my address? You worked for me. That doesn't answer the question. It answers it perfectly. Pelumi folded her arms, blocking the doorway. You shouldn't be here. And yet I am. She glanced at the bodyguards. This looks less like a visit and more like intimidation. Jae-Min barely looked back. Their insurance. For what? For the possibility that you slam the door in my face. Pelumi considered it. You're giving me ideas. For a moment, something almost playful flickered in his eyes. May I come in? No. He raised an eyebrow. You didn't even think about it. Because I don't need to. She leaned against the doorframe. I quit your company. That means we have nothing left to discuss. Jae-Min studied her quietly. You're certain about that? Yes. A small silence passed between them. Then he stepped closer. Not aggressively. Just enough that his presence filled the doorway. Pelumi's pulse jumped despite herself. You walked away from Kang Global, he said. Yes. You accused me of running a criminal empire. Yes. And now you think you can just disappear. She lifted her chin. That's exactly what I plan to do. Jae-Min's gaze sharpened. You're very confident. I'm very done. The two bodyguards exchanged subtle glances. No one talked to Jae-Min Kang like this. Except her. He exhaled slowly, almost amused. 5 minutes. What? Give me 5 minutes of your time.
No.
4. Still no. 3. Are you bargaining with me? His lips twitched faintly. Yes. Pelumi sighed in frustration. You're unbelievable. 3 minutes, Pelumi. She hesitated. Curiosity was winning. Against her better judgment. Fine, she muttered. 3 minutes. She stepped aside reluctantly. Jae-Min walked inside. The bodyguards remained outside, closing the door behind him. The moment he entered, the apartment suddenly felt smaller. Much smaller. His eyes scanned the room. The couch. The bookshelves. The small kitchen. You downgraded, he said. Pelumi crossed her arms. I upgraded my peace of mind. He removed his coat slowly and draped it over the chair, as if he intended to stay longer than 3 minutes. Pelumi noticed. Don't get comfortable. Jae-Min ignored the comment and stepped closer to the center of the room. You've been avoiding my calls. You noticed? I notice everything. She leaned against the kitchen counter. Then you already know the answer to whatever you came here to ask. I came to warn you. That caught her off guard. Warn me? Yes. Her suspicion returned instantly.
About what?
Jae-Min's eyes darkened slightly. About the consequences of what you discovered. Pelumi laughed quietly. Oh, please. You think I'm threatening you? I think that's your favorite hobby. He stepped closer. Pelumi. Her name sounded different when he said it. Lower. More personal. You saw financial routes that connect powerful people. And those people don't like witnesses. A chill crept down her spine. You're saying someone might come after me. I'm saying they already might be. The room went quiet. Pelumi forced herself not to react. You're lying. Am I? You just want to scare me into coming back. He stepped closer again. Now only a few feet separated them. If I wanted to scare you, His voice dropped slightly. I wouldn't bother warning you first. Pelumi searched his face, trying to detect manipulation. But his expression was serious. Unsettlingly serious. So what? She said finally. You came here out of kindness? Not kindness. Then why? He held her gaze. For selfish reasons. What reasons? A slow silence filled the room. Then Jae-Min answered. Because I want you back. Pelumi blinked. What? At Kang Global. She stared at him. You flew across the city at midnight to offer me my job again? Yes. That's insane. Probably. She shook her head. I already told you no. You told me no before you knew the danger. And now you're pretending to be my protector? I'm not pretending. Pelumi stepped closer, her eyes blazing. You're the danger, Jae-Min. The way she said his name hung in the air between them. For a second, neither of them moved. Then he said quietly, You're wrong. Their faces were now only inches apart. Pelumi suddenly became very aware of how tall he was, how close he was, how steady his breathing sounded compared to her racing heartbeat. Then explain, she whispered. His voice lowered even further. The real danger is the people who want the information in your head. Her breath hitched. And you? Jae-Min's eyes softened slightly. I'm the one standing between them and you. The silence that followed felt electric. Pelumi swallowed. You expect me to believe that?
No.
Then why say it? His gaze lingered on her lips for the briefest second before returning to her eyes. Because whether you believe it or not, it's the truth. And suddenly Pelumi realized something terrifying. She had opened her door to a mafia boss at midnight. And now he was standing in her living room, looking at her like she had just become the most important problem in his life. The rain had slowed outside, leaving the streets of Itaewon glistening under neon lights. Inside Pelumi's apartment, the air felt heavier than the storm had been. Jae-Min Kang stood near the center of the room, calm and unreadable, as if showing up uninvited to a former employee's apartment at midnight was completely normal. Across from him, Pelumi Adebayo leaned against the kitchen counter, arms crossed tightly. She was trying very hard not to show how much his presence unsettled her. You're still standing there like you own the place, she said. Jae-Min glanced around the apartment again. Relax. If I wanted to take ownership of your apartment, I would have bought the building already. Pelumi rolled her eyes. That's not comforting. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The quiet between them wasn't comfortable.
It was charged.
Dangerous. Finally, Pelumi broke the silence. You said you had 3 minutes. Yes. It's been 10. I lost track. That's convenient. Jae-Min didn't respond. Instead, he reached inside his coat and pulled out a thin black folder. Pelumi immediately straightened. What is that? He placed the folder gently on the small coffee table. Information. She didn't move. I already know too much. You only know the surface. Pelumi hesitated before walking over slowly. Her instincts told her not to touch that folder. But curiosity had always been her greatest weakness. She opened it. Inside were documents, photographs, bank transfers, maps. Her stomach tightened. These are international financial routes. Yes. Millions of dollars moving through shell corporations. Yes. Pelumi looked up at him. This is worse than what I saw at Kang Global. Much worse. She flipped through the pages quickly. Her analytical mind immediately started connecting patterns. Transactions across Russia, Hong Kong, Dubai, and Los Angeles. Weapons manufacturers. Shipping routes. Black market brokers. Her eyes widened. This isn't just money laundering.
No.
This is a global arms network. Jae-Min's voice remained calm. Yes. Pelumi slowly closed the folder. Why are you showing me this? Because you're the only person I trust to analyze it. She stared at him like he had lost his mind. You broke into my life at midnight to offer me a job analyzing international crime. That's one way to describe it. Another way would be insanity. He took a step closer. You're the best financial analyst I've ever seen. That doesn't mean I want to work for a mafia boss. You already did. Without knowing. And now you know. Pelumi shook her head.
No.
You're refusing too quickly. I'm refusing because it's illegal. Jae-Min studied her face carefully. You believe the world works in legal categories. That's how society works. No, he said quietly. That's how society pretends to work. The way he said it made something in Pelumi's chest tighten. She hated that part of her understood what he meant. But she refused to give him the satisfaction. You're trying to justify crime. I'm explaining reality. Pelumi picked up the folder again. These transactions, these weapons, people are dying because of this. Yes. And you're involved. Jae-Min didn't flinch. Yes. Her anger flared. You're admitting it like it's nothing. His gaze sharpened. I'm admitting it because hiding from reality doesn't change it. Pelumi slammed the folder shut. I'm not helping you. Silence filled the room again. Jae-Min walked slowly toward the window, looking out at the glowing streets below. Then he spoke quietly. You think I built this empire for profit, didn't you?
No.
Pelumi frowned. Then why? He turned back toward her. For control. That sounds worse. Control over people who are far more dangerous than I am. Pelumi stared at him skeptically. You expect me to believe you're some kind of hero? No. His voice lowered slightly. I expect you to understand strategy. He walked back toward the table and opened the folder again. He flipped to one photograph. Pelumi looked down.
A man.
Cold eyes. Military uniform. The name below the picture made her stomach drop. Viktor Sokolov, she read quietly. International weapons broker.
Correct.
She looked up. He supplies half the war zones in Eastern Europe. Yes. And you're competing with him? Jae-Min shook his head slowly. I'm dismantling his network. Pelumi blinked. What? He uses shell companies to move weapons. I use shell companies to track them. She frowned. You're saying your empire is to trap? In part. Her brain struggled to process the information. You're telling me the Korean Mafia is secretly fighting arms traffickers. I'm telling you the world is complicated. Pelumi paced slowly across the room. This makes no sense. Look closer. She studied the documents again. And then something clicked. Certain transactions were being redirected. Accounts frozen. Shipments intercepted. Her analytical instincts lit up. You're disrupting their supply chains. Yes. But you're also profiting from it. I never said I was a saint. Pelumi sighed heavily. You're unbelievable. Yet you're still reading. She slammed the folder closed again. This doesn't change my answer. No.
No.
Jae-Min stepped closer. Now they stood only inches apart. His presence was overwhelming in the small apartment. You're the only person who can see patterns in these numbers the way I need. Find someone else. I already did. And they weren't you. Pelumi looked up into his dark eyes. You're very persistent. I get what I want. That's not how this works. He leaned slightly closer. Close enough that she could feel the warmth of his breath. It usually is. Her heart suddenly beat faster. And she hated that reaction. You're manipulating me. I'm recruiting you. For crime. For strategy. Same thing. Not always. Pelumi forced herself to step back. Even if I believed your story. Why me? Jae-Min answered without hesitation. Because you walked away. She frowned. That makes no sense. Everyone in my world wants power from me. And you were the first person who refused it. His voice softened slightly. That makes you dangerous. Pelumi stared at him. Dangerous? Yes.
Why?
Because you can't be bought. The tension between them thickened again. Neither of them moved. Finally, Pelumi spoke. So, what exactly are you asking? Jae-Min met her gaze directly. I want you to work for me again. Her stomach flipped.
No.
You haven't heard the full offer. I don't need to. You'll have full access. Still no. You'll have protection. I didn't ask for it. And he paused slightly. You'll have me. Pelumi blinked. What does that mean? His voice dropped. It means you'll be under my protection. And if I refuse? Jae-Min held her gaze for several seconds. Then he said quietly, then I'll keep protecting you anyway. Her heart skipped. That's not how choices work. His eyes darkened slightly. In my world, it is. Pelumi took a deep breath. Leave. Jae-Min didn't move. Leave, Jae-Min. For the first time that night, he looked almost reluctant. Then, he picked up his coat, walked to the door. Before leaving, he turned back toward her. Someone is already watching you. Her stomach tightened. Don't start that again. I'm not starting it. His voice lowered. I'm warning you. He opened the door. But before stepping out, he added one final sentence. When they come for you, remember that I offered you protection first. The door closed behind him. Pelumi stood frozen in the center of her apartment. Her mind racing, her heart pounding. And despite everything she had said, she couldn't stop thinking about one terrifying possibility. What if he was telling the truth? 3 days passed after Jae-Min Kang left Pelumi's apartment. 3 quiet, uneasy days. Pelumi tried to return to a normal life. She applied for new jobs, updated her resume, and tried to ignore the stack of documents still sitting on her table, the same folder Jae-Min had left behind. She should have thrown it away, burned it, forgotten everything. But every time she reached for it, her curiosity stopped her. Because the numbers inside those pages told a story. A dangerous one. And Pelumi Adebayo had always been the kind of woman who solved puzzles. Even dangerous ones. That evening, the streets of Itaewon were alive with music and neon lights. Restaurants overflowed with laughter, couples walked arm in arm, and tourists snapped photos beneath glowing signs. Pelumi stepped out of a small convenience store with a bag of groceries. She had spent most of the day indoors, staring at financial patterns until her head hurt. Fresh air felt good. Normal. She began walking toward her apartment building a few blocks away. Her heels clicked against the pavement. For the first time all day, her thoughts quieted. Until something felt wrong. Pelumi slowed her pace slightly. At first she couldn't explain it. But then she noticed it. A black SUV parked across the street. Its engine was running. The windows were tinted dark. She kept walking, trying to convince herself she was imagining things. But when she turned the corner toward her apartment street, the SUV slowly pulled away from the curb. Her stomach tightened. Okay, don't panic, she muttered. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe someone was just leaving. But then she heard another engine behind her. A second car. Moving slowly. Too slowly. Her pulse began to rise. Pelumi glanced back casually. 2 men sat in the front seats, watching her. The moment her eyes met theirs, the car sped up. Fear shot through her chest. She turned forward quickly and began walking faster. Her apartment was only 2 blocks away. Just get inside. Just get to the door. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. The streets suddenly felt too empty. Too quiet. Then, screech. A van suddenly swerved around the corner ahead of her. And stopped. Directly in her path. The side door slid open. 3 men jumped out. Pelumi froze. One of them grabbed her arm. Miss Adebayo. Her heart slammed against her ribs. Huh. Do you know my name? The man smirked. You've been very interesting to certain people. She tried to pull away. Let go of me. Another man stepped closer. You worked for Kang Global. Pelumi's blood ran cold. I quit. That doesn't erase what you saw. Her mind raced. Jae-Min's warning echoed in her head. Someone is already watching you. Look, she said quickly. You have the wrong person. The man tightened his grip. Actually, we have the perfect one. They began dragging her toward the van. Pelumi struggled. Let me go. Her grocery bag dropped to the ground. Oranges rolled across the pavement. One of the men pulled out a gun. Stop fighting. Her heart pounded wildly. This was really happening. She was being kidnapped. And there was no one around to help. Then suddenly, bang! A gunshot echoed down the street. The man holding the weapon dropped instantly. The other 2 men froze in shock. Before they could react,
Bang. Bang.
2 more shots rang out. Both attackers collapsed to the pavement. Pelumi stumbled backward, breath shaking. Her eyes scanned the street wildly. Then she saw it. A sleek black car had pulled up silently behind them. The passenger door opened, and stepping out of the car was Jae-Min Kang. He looked completely calm, as if this entire scene had been expected. 2 of his men rushed past him, securing the area with swift efficiency. Within seconds, the attackers were disarmed and restrained. Pelumi stared at him, her heart racing. You. Jae-Min walked toward her slowly. His expression was unreadable. Are you hurt? His voice was quiet, controlled. Pelumi blinked, still shaking. You're asking me that now? His eyes scanned her quickly, checking for injuries. I asked a question. I'm fine. Her voice cracked slightly. You knew this was going to happen. Yes. Anger exploded through her fear. And you didn't tell me? I warned you. You didn't say I was going to get kidnapped. The tension in the air thickened. Jae-Min looked down briefly at the unconscious men on the pavement, then back at her. I didn't know when they would make their move. Pelumi's hands trembled. They would have taken me, and I stopped them. You're acting like that makes this okay. His voice dropped slightly. I told you the danger was real. She took a shaky step toward him. You should have told me everything, and you would have believed me? Pelumi opened her mouth, but no words came out, because he was right. She wouldn't have believed him. Jae-Min stepped closer. The streetlights cast shadows across his face. You're stubborn, he said quietly. And you're controlling. Maybe. His gaze hardened slightly. But you're alive. Pelumi's anger slowly faded into exhaustion. Her knees suddenly felt weak. Jae-Min noticed immediately. Before she could fall, his arm wrapped around her waist, steadying her. The warmth of his hand against her side sent an unexpected shiver through her. I'm not fragile, she muttered. I know. Then stop holding me like I'm going to faint. But she didn't move away either. Jae-Min studied her face closely. You're shaking. I just got kidnapped. Attempted kidnapping. Still counts. One of his men approached quietly. Sir, these men belong to the Sokolov network. Jae-Min's eyes darkened instantly. Take them. Yes, sir. The attackers were quickly dragged away and shoved into a vehicle. Within seconds, the street looked almost normal again, as if the violence had never happened. Pelumi stared at Jae-Min. You are following me? Yes. For 3 days? Yes. That's creepy. That's protection. She sighed heavily. You're impossible. He looked down at her. You're stubborn. Maybe. For a moment they stood there quietly. The tension between them was different now. Less hostile. More complicated. Finally Jae-Min spoke again. You're not safe living here anymore. Pelumi immediately shook her head.
No.
You saw what just happened. I'm not moving into your Mafia mansion. Penthouse. Same difference. Jae-Min's voice softened slightly. Pelumi. She met his gaze. You need protection. I can protect myself. You just got kidnapped. Attempted. He stepped closer. Now their faces were only inches apart. You're coming with me. Her breath caught. That's not a request, is it? His voice dropped to a low whisper.
No.
Pelumi stared at him. For several seconds, neither of them moved. Finally, she sighed in defeat. Just for tonight. A small smile touched his lips. Of course. But something in his eyes suggested he already knew the truth. Once Pelumi stepped into his world, there was no easy way out. And deep down, they both knew it. The elevator ride to the top floor of Jae-Min Kang's penthouse tower was painfully quiet. Pelumi stood with her arms crossed, staring straight ahead at the reflective elevator doors. Behind her, Jae-Min leaned casually against the wall, hands in his coat pockets, watching her with quiet amusement. You can stop glaring at the door, he said. I'm not glaring. You've been doing it for 12 floors. Pelumi exhaled sharply. You kidnapped me. I rescued you. Then kidnapped me. Jae-Min's lips twitched slightly. If I kidnapped you, you'd be tied to a chair. Pelumi shot him a look. That is not comforting. The elevator chimed softly as the doors opened. They stepped out into a private hallway that looked more like the entrance to a luxury hotel suite than someone's home. Soft lighting, dark marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows revealing the glittering skyline of Seoul. Pelumi stopped walking. You live here? Yes. This is bigger than my entire apartment building. That's not my fault. She turned to face him. You're ridiculously rich for someone who claims to be dismantling criminal networks. I never said I was doing it for free. Pelumi shook her head. You're unbelievable. But despite her irritation, she couldn't hide the small flicker of awe. The penthouse was stunning.
Modern.
Elegant. Dangerously quiet. Jae-Min walked toward the bar area and poured himself a glass of water. Your room is down the hall. Pelumi blinked. My room? Yes. You already prepared a room? I prepared it yesterday. She stared at him. You assumed I'd say yes. I assumed you'd need protection. You're extremely confident. I'm extremely observant. Pelumi walked slowly across the living room, studying the massive glass windows overlooking the city. Seoul glittered beneath them like a sea of stars. For a moment, she forgot to be angry. Then she remembered. She turned around quickly. This doesn't change anything. Jae-Min raised an eyebrow. What doesn't? I'm not working for you. Of course not. You're just keeping me here for protection. Correct. And once the danger is gone, I leave. Jae-Min took a sip of water. If that's what you want. Something about his tone made Pelumi narrow her eyes. You don't believe me. I believe you believe it. She groaned. You're impossible to argue with. That's why I win most arguments. Pelumi rolled her eyes and turned away again. But as she walked toward the hallway, the lights suddenly flickered. Then everything went dark. The entire penthouse plunged into blackness. Pelumi froze. Jae-Min, I'm here. Why did the lights go out? Storm damage to the grid, probably. You said this building has backup power. It does. So, why is it still dark? A small pause. Maintenance. Pelumi sighed. Of course. She began feeling her way through the darkness. I'm finding a flashlight. You're walking the wrong direction. How do you know? Because you're about to walk into the... Thud. Pelumi collided directly into him. Her hands instinctively grabbed his shirt to steady herself. Jae-Min caught her by the waist. Strong hands.
Warm.
Steady. The sudden contact sent a shock through her body. For a moment, neither of them moved. You could have warned me, she whispered. I tried. Her hands were still gripping his shirt. His hands were still holding her waist. Neither of them let go. The darkness around them made everything feel closer, more intimate. Pelumi became painfully aware of how close their faces were. She could feel the warmth of his breath. You should let go, she murmured. You grabbed me first. That's not the point. Then what is? Her heart began beating faster. Jae-Min, yes, you're still holding me, and you're still standing very close. Pelumi swallowed. He wasn't wrong, but stepping away suddenly felt harder than it should. Finally, she whispered, Why are you looking at me like that? His voice dropped lower. Like what? Like you're thinking something dangerous. He hesitated, then answered honestly. I am. Her breath caught slightly. And what would that be? Another silence. Then Jae-Min spoke quietly. That you're the only woman who walks into my life and argues with me more than my enemies. Pelumi let out a soft laugh. That's your romantic line?
No.
His fingers tightened slightly on her waist. This is... Before she could respond, he kissed her. Slow.
Deep.
Unexpected. Pelumi's eyes widened in shock. For a split second she forgot how to breathe. But instead of pushing him away, her fingers tightened in his shirt, and she kissed him back. The tension between them exploded instantly. Weeks of arguments, frustration, curiosity, all colliding in one moment. Jae-Min pulled her closer, his hand sliding slightly up her back. Pelumi's pulse raced wildly. Then suddenly, the lights flickered back on.
Bright.
Blinding. They both froze, still standing inches apart. Pelumi stepped back quickly, breath uneven. That shouldn't have happened. Jae-Min looked surprisingly calm. Why not? Because you're a mafia boss. And I'm supposed to hate you. Supposed to? Pelumi glared at him. You're very smug right now. Only a little. She ran a hand through her hair, trying to regain composure. This complicates things. It clarifies things.
How?
Jae-Min stepped closer again, his voice softer now. Because now we both know the tension between us wasn't just arguments. Pelumi crossed her arms. That kiss meant nothing. Of course. Absolutely nothing. Clearly. Their eyes locked. Neither of them looked convinced. Finally, Pelumi turned toward the hallway. I'm going to bed. Good idea.
She paused.
Then looked back at him. If you try that again, yes, I might actually punch you. A faint smile appeared on Jae-Min's lips. I'll take that risk. Pelumi disappeared down the hallway. But once inside the guest room, she leaned against the door and pressed a hand to her racing heart. Because the truth was, that kiss hadn't been a mistake. And somewhere, in the penthouse living room, Jae-Min Kang stood silently, replaying the moment in his mind. For the first time in years, the most feared mafia boss in Seoul realized something dangerous. Pelumi Adebayo was becoming the one weakness he couldn't control. And that terrified him more than any enemy ever had. Morning sunlight poured through the massive glass windows of Jae-Min Kang's penthouse, casting golden reflections across the marble floors. But inside the guest room, Pelumi Adebayo hadn't slept much. She sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the city's skyline. Her mind kept replaying the same moment. The darkness. The closeness.
The kiss.
Her hand moved unconsciously to her lips. Stop it, she muttered to herself. It meant nothing. It was just tension. Just adrenaline. Just. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Pelumi looked up. Come in. The door opened. Jae-Min stepped inside, already dressed in a crisp black shirt and dark trousers, looking as calm and composed as if nothing had happened the night before. Pelumi immediately folded her arms. You're early. I live here. That's not what I meant. His eyes studied her briefly. You didn't sleep well. And you did.
Yes.
She frowned. That's unfair. He walked further into the room and placed a tablet on the desk near the window. We have a problem. Pelumi sighed. Of course we do. She stood and walked over. What kind of problem? Jae-Min tapped the screen. Several images appeared. Maps. Financial charts. Photos of men Pelumi didn't recognize. She leaned closer, her analytical instincts kicking in immediately. These are the same networks from the folder. Yes. Her eyes narrowed. But something's different. Jae-Min nodded. They've accelerated their operations. Pelumi scrolled through the files quickly. Weapons shipments. Transfer routes. Encrypted transactions. Her stomach tightened. This isn't just arms trading anymore.
No.
This is preparation for something bigger. Yes. She looked up at him slowly. A war. Jae-Min's expression darkened. That's the most likely outcome. Pelumi rubbed her temples. This is insane. That's the world we live in. She turned toward him sharply.
No.
Her voice was firm now. You're telling me criminal organizations are preparing a global weapons distribution and governments aren't stopping it? Jae-Min gave a quiet, humorless laugh. Some governments are funding it. Pelumi stared at him. You're serious? Completely. She paced slowly across the room, her mind racing. So, let me understand something. You built a mafia empire. Yes. To infiltrate criminal networks. Yes. To control weapons trafficking. Yes. So you can stop something worse. Jae-Min folded his arms. That's the simplified version. Pelumi let out a long breath. You realize how insane that sounds. Yes. And you expect me to just believe you. I expect you to analyze the data. Pelumi looked back at the screen again. Her brain quickly began connecting patterns. Supply chains. Money routes. Power shifts. Then she noticed something strange. Wait, She zoomed in on one section of the financial chart. These transfers. What about them? They're disappearing. Yes. Pelumi turned toward him. You're cutting off their funding. Exactly. Her eyes widened slightly. You're not expanding your empire. You're shrinking theirs. A small silence filled the room. Then Pelumi said quietly, You're fighting a shadow war. Jae-Min didn't respond, but the silence was answer enough. She leaned back against the desk, studying him differently now. You could die doing this. I'm aware. You have enemies all over the world. Yes. And you're still doing it. His voice lowered slightly. Someone has to. Pelumi's gaze softened for a moment. For the first time since meeting him, she saw something beyond the Mafia boss, beyond the cold strategist. A man carrying a dangerous burden. Then she caught herself. Don't think this excuses everything. I never said it did. You still run a criminal empire. And yet here you are analyzing it. Pelumi sighed. I hate that you have a point. Jae-Min walked closer to the window beside her. The city stretched endlessly beneath them.
Bright. Alive.
Unaware of the battles happening in the shadows. You're the only person outside my organization who knows the full picture, he said quietly. Pelumi frowned. That sounds like a terrible security decision. Maybe. Why tell me at all? He turned toward her. Because you deserve the truth. The sincerity in his voice caught her off guard. And also, he stepped closer. Because you're already part of this whether you like it or not. Pelumi looked away. I didn't choose this.
No.
But you're here. She glanced back at him. And whose fault is that? Partially mine. She raised an eyebrow. That's the closest thing to an apology I've heard from you. I'm capable of them. Rarely, I assume. Very. They stood quietly for a moment. The tension between them felt different now. Less hostile. More personal. Pelumi spoke softly. You're risking everything for this. Yes. Your empire. Yes. Your life. Yes. She hesitated. Why? Jae-Min looked out at the city again. For a long moment, he didn't answer. Then he said quietly, Because I grew up watching powerful men destroy lives and call it business. Pelumi listened silently. And I realized something, he continued. The only way to stop monsters is to become one they're afraid of. Pelumi studied him carefully. You don't look like a monster. A faint smile touched his lips. That's because you haven't seen me at war. Their eyes met again. The air between them thickened with unspoken thoughts. Pelumi finally said softly, You're the most complicated man I've ever met, and you're the most stubborn woman I've ever met. That's not a compliment. It is to me. She rolled her eyes, then glanced back at the tablet. This data needs serious analysis. Yes. You have gaps in your financial tracking. I know. And your predictive models are weak. Also true. Pelumi crossed her arms thoughtfully. You need someone better at this. Yes. Jae-Min's eyes held hers. And that someone is you. Pelumi sighed. You really don't give up, do you?
No.
She looked back at the glowing screen. Her analytical mind was already working, already solving problems, already connecting patterns, which annoyed her greatly. Fine, she muttered. Jae-Min's eyebrow lifted. Fine. I'll help analyze the network. A small pause. Temporarily. His lips curved slightly. Of course. But this doesn't mean I'm working for you. Understood. And it definitely doesn't mean I'm staying here long term. Understood. She narrowed her eyes. You're enjoying this. A little. Pelumi shook her head. You're dangerous. And yet, he stepped closer again. You're still here. Their faces were only inches apart now. Pelumi's heart beat faster again. You're very confident, she whispered. I have good instincts. And what are they telling you now? Jae-Min's voice dropped to a quiet murmur. That you're not leaving anytime soon. Pelumi tried to hold his gaze. But suddenly the room felt warmer. Too warm. She stepped back quickly. We have work to do. Jae-Min didn't hide his smile this time. Yes, he said softly. We do. And somewhere deep inside, both of them realized something dangerous. Pelumi hadn't just stepped into Jae-Min Kang's world. She was beginning to belong there. Night had fallen over Seoul, but inside Jae-Min Kang's penthouse, the lights were still blazing. The command room, usually quiet and controlled, was filled with tension. Large digital screens covered the walls, displaying maps, financial routes, and real-time intelligence feeds. Several of Jae-Min's trusted men stood around the room, speaking in low, urgent voices. Something was wrong. Very wrong. And everyone knew it. Pelumi Adebayo stood at one of the screens, scrolling quickly through a series of financial transfers. Her eyes moved rapidly, her mind piecing together the puzzle. Then suddenly, she froze. No. Jae-Min, who had been speaking to one of his security chiefs, turned toward her immediately. What is it? Pelumi's voice was tight. They're not just moving money. He walked toward her. What do you mean? She pointed at the screen. These transactions, they're coordinated.
How?
They're funding multiple operations at the same time. Jae-Min studied the data. His jaw tightened. Diversion tactics. Pelumi nodded slowly. Yes. He looked at the map. If they're distracting us financially, then the real move is happening somewhere else. Before anyone could respond,
Beep, beep, beep.
a loud alarm suddenly erupted through the room. One of the security monitors flashed red. Sir, a guard shouted. Perimeter breach. Another screen lit up with camera footage. Black vehicles pulling up outside the building. Armed men stepping out. Pelumi's heart dropped. They found us. Jae-Min's face hardened instantly. How many? At least 20 armed men. Another guard shouted from across the room. More vehicles approaching. The room exploded into action. Weapons were loaded. Orders were shouted. Jae-Min grabbed his jacket and turned to Pelumi. You need to go to the safe room. Her eyes flashed.
No.
This is not negotiable. Neither is my answer. Jae-Min stepped closer, his voice firm. Pelumi, this is a war zone. And you think I'm leaving you here alone? I've handled worse. Then you can handle this with help. He stared at her. You're not trained for combat. No, she said calmly. But I'm trained to think. Jae-Min hesitated. One of his men rushed over. Sir, they're entering the lobby. Another explosion echoed faintly through the building. Pelumi didn't flinch. Instead, she turned toward the screens again. They're not just attacking. Jae-Min frowned.
What?
She zoomed in on the financial data again. This entire attack is a distraction. For what? Her fingers moved quickly across the keyboard. Then another screen lit up. Pelumi's eyes widened. Oh no. What is it? They're hacking your financial network. Jae-Min's expression darkened. They want access to the transaction records. Yes. Which means... Pelumi finished the sentence. They're trying to erase their tracks. The room fell silent for half a second. Then Jae-Min barked orders. Secure the server room. 2 guards immediately rushed out. Pelumi turned to him. You see? He looked at her. Yes. Now, imagine if I had gone to the safe room. Despite the chaos, the corner of his mouth twitched slightly. You're still stubborn. Always. Another explosion shook the building. Dust fell lightly from the ceiling. The attackers were getting closer. Jae-Min grabbed a weapon from the table and handed another to one of his men. Pelumi watched him carefully.
Calm.
Focused. Completely in control. You're not scared, she said quietly. He glanced at her. Fear is a luxury in moments like this. And what if you lose? Jae-Min stepped closer to her. His voice softened slightly. Then I'll make sure you get out first. Pelumi's heart tightened. You still think I'm leaving? Yes. She shook her head slowly. You really don't understand me. Gunfire echoed from the lower floors. The battle had begun. Jae-Min turned toward the hallway. I'm ending this. Pelumi grabbed his arm before he could leave. He looked down at her hand, then at her face. You're not going down there, he said. Correct. He blinked once. I'm coming with you.
No.
Yes. You could get killed. Pelumi met his gaze steadily. So could you. For a moment, the world around them seemed to fade. Gunshots, alarms, shouting. None of it mattered. Only the decision between them. Jae-Min spoke quietly. You still have time to walk away from this life. Pelumi shook her head. I tried. And her voice softened. I failed. He studied her face for several seconds, looking for hesitation.
Fear. Doubt.
But there was none. Only determination. Finally, he asked one last question. Why? Pelumi stepped closer. Close enough that their foreheads nearly touched. Because somewhere between quitting your company and getting kidnapped, I realized something. What? Her voice dropped to a whisper. I don't want a normal life. Jae-Min's heartbeat slowed. And what life do you want? Pelumi smiled softly. The one where I stand beside you. Silence filled the space between them. Then Jae-Min did something none of his men had ever seen before. He pulled her into his arms.
Tightly. Protectively.
You were supposed to run from me, he murmured. Pelumi looked up at him. I tried. And she kissed him.
Slow.
Confident.
Certain.
I failed. Jae-Min kissed her back, deeper this time, as if sealing an unspoken promise. When they finally pulled apart, he rested his forehead against hers. You realize this changes everything. Pelumi smiled. I know. Gunfire echoed again from below. Reality returned instantly. Jae-Min grabbed his weapon and looked toward the hallway. Stay behind me. Pelumi shook her head. We move together. He hesitated, then nodded once. Together, they stepped toward the fight. Not as boss and employee, not as protector and civilian, but as partners. And somewhere in the burning chaos of the battle below, everyone in the criminal world would soon learn something terrifying. Jae-Min Kang no longer stood alone, because the woman who once quit his empire had just chosen to become the queen beside the king of Seoul's underworld.